This video will present my paper for the 2020 American Association of Teachers of Japanese Conference, Patterns and Puzzles, Allusive Strategy in the Genji Hinagata. The tale of Genji first appeared in print in the Keicho period from 1596 to 1615. This saga-bone version was followed almost a generation later, in 1650 and 1654, by the first illustrated versions. These illustrated editions by Yamamoto Shunsho were part of the spark that led to the boom of Genji publications between the 1650s and 70s. People in the mid-17th century knew there was money to be made in Genji images, in books, household goods, and kosode. The kosode pattern book, called the Genji Hinagata, printed in Jokyo 4, 1687, was taking advantage of the tale's success. Though women had always enjoyed the tale, reading and copying it for generations, in the early Edo period there was a new group of male scholars who attempted to limit women's access to the tale. In the same year that the Genji Hinagata was printed, some were wondering if Genji and Issei should be destroyed with Koshokubon. Proponents of Genji argued that the tale was a sweetened pill designed to bring readers to Buddhist enlightenment. Yamamoto Shunsho himself declared that the reason he had illustrated the book was to make it easier for women and girls to read. The Genji Hinagata wastes no ink making arguments either for women's reading or against. Its existence in of itself shows that the author and publisher believed that women had the right to read and interact with the tale. This book is a pattern book, first and foremost. It depicts 139 patterns, 27 of which are inspired by historical or fictional women. The first 11 women are characters from the tale of Genji. Many of the patterns in the book are based on or related to patterns published in other contemporary books. It is not the patterns that make this book unique. What puts this book in a hybrid category of literary media is the fact that these 27 patterns represent the character, personality, and biographies of historical and fictional women. And each of these patterns has an accompanying text that describes the woman. This book was such a hit that the artist, author, publisher did not stop at 11 women from Genji, but continued into 2 further volumes. Nonetheless, the title had to be Genji. My research has taken a new approach to this text. I interpret the patterns not simply based on their visual elements, but by relying on the textual passage to the left of each pattern. In my talk today, I will discuss the Fujitsubo pattern. This pattern is something of an enigma. The image does not seem to fit Fujitsubo's character, and the text refers to a poem by Kino Tsurayuki's daughter, a historical woman who is not referenced in the tale of Genji itself. What does this pattern mean? How is it related to Genji? And what does this pattern show us about women's lives in the Edo period? The passage and pattern offer readers a puzzle that can only be solved with intertextual knowledge. To preface the discussion of the text itself, let's first think about the education of women during the Edo period. How many and what type of women could read the Genji Hinagata? A study on Edo period education performed in 1965 estimated that 15% of women had an elementary education. However, in big cities like Edo, Kyoto, and Osaka, the percentage may have been much higher. The patterns popular during the 1650s to 80s are often decorated with hiragana and kanji, which implies that women who wore these designs could read them. Ayaka Baba has suggested that the artists who designed the kosode and artisans who executed the designs both had enough literacy to create these literary patterns. So kosode wearers were literate, but how culturally knowledgeable were they? Some scholars have suggested that women of the Edo period only read digests of the tale of Genji. Women might know many details, but not know much about the original dialogue or narration of the tale. This interpretation has been applied to the Genji Hinagata. Yet a careful reading of the text of the Hinagata itself shows that there is not simply literacy, but cultural literacy of a high level that is required to understand the text. To give a straightforward example of the allusions used in the Genji Hinagata and the three goals of each text passage, I would like to introduce the Kiritsubo consort pattern. As the woman who gives the first chapter its title, it is fitting that she be the first woman of the book. The image on the left page shows the Kiritsubo consort holding Genji's hand. The passage depicts the consort's background and meaning in the tale while making several puns about the design of her kosore pattern. The text reads, "On the auspicious first day of spring, wearing the wakamatsu pattern, though she is not the daughter of a rich, powerful man, her reputation is known. This pattern, with a white base, like the saying knowing heaven and earth, depicts the Kiritsubo consort. The consort was lovely, adorable, and elegant, especially beloved by the emperor. She bore the shining Genji, and as his mother, wearing the kosore died with feeling, holding his hand, like the rope decorations, she is bound to this man, the emperor. And as the depth of her bond is bottomless, crimson threads embroidered in this pattern is like the nest of the crane that lives to be 1,000 years." First, the passage mentions her humble lineage, the daughter of a not rich or powerful man. Then it describes her physical appearance as lovely, adorable, and elegant. Moreover, it specifically mentions the detail that Kiritsubo is holding her son's hand in the image. The rope decorations mentioned in the passage and depicted on the kosore are emblematic of the bonds between her and both the emperor and her son. This passage shows the three goals of the text. First, to explain the meaning of the design, symbols in the pattern. Second, to explain the woman's depiction in the tale, her relationship to other characters, and her defining characteristics. And third, to sell the kosore itself. This pattern is likened to the nest that cradles a crane who lives to be 1,000 years. In other words, this kosore is meant to be either a wedding or New Year's pattern. It is very common for kosore pattern books to begin with either a crane or turtle pattern, appropriate for New Year's occasions. Yet we would not expect to see the ill-starred Kiritsubo consort tied to lucky symbols. The passage explains that because she is the mother of the emperor's child, who should live, according to poetry, for 1,000 years, she is appropriately lucky for the first pattern of a book. Fujitsubo is the seventh woman presented in this text. Though Fujitsubo is one of the most famous and integral characters to the tale, she is rarely shown in woodblock prints. In Shunsho's illustrated editions, there is a striking illustration of Fujitsubo during the Sakaki chapter. After the Kiritsubo emperor has passed away, Genji is emboldened to sneak into Fujitsubo's chambers while she is ill. She has another fainting spell, while Genji is hidden in a closet, and the ladies-in-waiting and servants are depicted frantically crying and rushing about. Genji's presence is not even hinted at through an exposed sleeve. Fujitsubo herself is lying near death in the middle of the frame, flanked by her ladies-in-waiting. Another famous depiction of Fujitsubo appears in the cover illustrations, Ebyoshi, by Toso Mitsunobu. In this image, Genji visits Fujitsubo and her brother, the Hyobukyo prince, while Fujitsubo is sick. This scene also takes place during the Sakaki chapter. These two images of Fujitsubo both portray her while she is ill, but the Shunsho woodblock displays her frailty and proximity to death. In the Mitsunobu image, Fujitsubo is still a woman of power, and illustrated in a position of respect. Her illness is only implied by the fact that she is depicted seated in the moya, innermost chamber. This is the layout of the Fujitsubo pattern and text. In the Hinagata image, Fujitsubo and Genji are depicted anachronistically, together as they have never been presented in other illustrations, simply a woman and a young man. The age difference is accentuated by the fact that Genji is seated while she is standing. The pattern on the right-hand page is composed of several elements. First, from the right sleeve down the right side of the body and ending on the right hem, there is a large snow roundel that encompasses a wisteria plant hanging on a trellis. Above the roundel, on the right shoulder and mid-back, are the characters for uguisu, Japanese bush warbler, and yado, cottage. Around the letters and at the middle of the hem, there are scattered sakura blossoms. According to the Genji Hinagata, the letters should be done in kanoko shibori, tie-dye. The sakura blossoms should be in kanoko with some areas in shiraboshi. This shiraboshi technique has not been explained in previous scholarship, but I believe that it might be resist or tie-dye in the shape of stars. This technique is also suggested for the utsusemi, ukifune, and koto no naishi patterns. The base color for the area around the snow roundel should be crimson. The wisteria inside of the snow roundel should be a combination of wisteria, a slightly blue mauve color, white, sky blue, and purple. The snow roundel itself should be turquoise. The trellis should be a variety of the previously mentioned colors. In all, the mix of crimson, turquoise, purple, wisteria, sky blue, and white would be a truly striking combination. The pattern book specifically calls for sakura, rather than the plum blossoms one might expect, but this could be a mistake on the part of the kosode designer, or might indicate that the Genji Hinagata took a pattern currently in vogue and reinterpreted it to illustrate Fujitsubo's personality. Let us now turn to the passage. Querying, where is the bush warbler's cottage? The plum-scented sleeves reflected in the crimson-dyed sleeves, becoming lost on love's path, uncertainty in the way that Fujitsubo leans coquettishly in this painted color. After the rains have soaked these sleeves, the shining sun princess she is called, how lovely she must have been. I would like to draw attention to the last line, where rain-soaked sleeves are mentioned. The dripping sleeves of the passage are an allusion to Fujitsubo's poem to Genji after she has given birth to Reise, their secret son. Oh, I know full well he only calls forth further dews that moisten my sleeves, yet I have no heart to scorn so lovely a little pink. Genji has attempted many times to contact Fujitsubo, but she often does not even read his letters and rarely responds. Genji is touched to receive a letter from Fujitsubo declaring that she will not abandon her child, regardless of the shame and scandal possible from discovery. Unlike other passages in the Genji Hinagata, Fujitsubo's text does not end with a direct quote of a poem, but a simple allusion to the main imagery of her poem. The reader must supply the content and context of the poem from their own knowledge of the tale. The reference to the bush warbler's cottage in the passage and the characters Uguisu and Yado on the kosode allude to a tale of Kino Tsurayuki's daughter. The tale is told in both the Okagami and in an abbreviated version in the Jikkin Sho. I will quote the abbreviated Jikkin Sho version here. In the cottage of Tsurayuki's daughter, there was a red plum that blossomed fragrantly. When she was commanded to give it to the emperor, she fashioned a bush warbler's nest and presented it thus. It's the emperor's command, so it cannot be helped. But when the bush warbler returns and asks where his home is, how shall I respond? In this account, the emperor commands Tsurayuki's daughter to hand over a plum tree, which she rather brazenly attaches a poem to. Tsurayuki's daughter poses the question, what will the Uguisu do when he comes to my house looking for his perch? Or more pointedly, now what will I do without my tree to attract birds and visitors? To return to our kosode pattern, how could a poem written by Tsurayuki's daughter possibly be related to a fictional empress? To understand this, there is a clue in the Okagami version. In the Okagami, the tale of Tsurayuki's daughter is prefaced with the note that the event took place in the Tenryaku period, during Emperor Murakami's reign. At this time, the Fujitsubo section of the palace was occupied by the daughter of Fujiwara no Morosuke, Anshi. This Fujitsubo is the great lady that presided over more than 20 years of the court, but perhaps is most well known for the fact that she bore the Emperor Reizei. The fictional Kiritsubo emperor is commonly believed to have been inspired by Emperor Murakami, and the name given to Genji and Fujitsubo's secret son in the tale of Genji is, of course, Reizei. The bush warbler and cottage element are never alluded to in the tale of Genji itself. These elements, the words in the pattern, and the allusion in the passage, function solely to lead the reader to remember the historical period that the tale is supposedly based on. From that, the connection of bush warbler to the historical Murakami, Fujitsubo, and Reizei causes to imagine the fictional Kiritsubo, Fujitsubo, and Reizei. The encyclopedic knowledge that is required to tease out the meaning of the Genji Hinagata passages proves without a doubt the erudition of both the author and the breadth of the necessary education required for readers to appreciate the meaning of the patterns. To conclude, I would like to recap the 3 goals of the Fujitsubo text. First, the text describes Fujitsubo's appearance in the tale, alluding to her nickname, as well as one of her most famous poems. Second, the first line of the passage quotes from Tsurayuki's daughter's poem, noting that the bush warbler will ask where his home is, and referencing sleeves dripping with the scent of plum blossoms. Finally, the meaning of the pattern is alluded to, but takes a well-educated reader to solve the puzzle and make the connection between the fictional Emperor Kiritsubo, Fujitsubo, and Reizei and their historical counterparts. The reader of the Genji Hinagata not only had a clear interest in and knowledge of classical literature, but she was also a stylish woman looking to display her brilliance. This book offers a new way to look at gender, women's education, literary reception, and art in the Edo period. We can see from the Genji Hinagata that women's education may have been much broader and more in-depth than previously thought. This text, that has been ignored by literary scholars due to its proximity to women's fashion and supposed lack of relation to the original text, is a valuable artifact showing how women use their education. Genji was not simply a dry educational tool or a manual for creating poetry. It was interesting in of itself. Women were drawn to the tale and wanted to show their affection for favorite characters. These kosode also show the high level of interpersonal connection inspired by the tale. Viewers and owners of these kosode would interact based on whether the viewer could accurately interpret the pattern's allusion. Like-minded souls could bond over these kosode. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and I hope that you look up my other articles about the Genji Hinagata for more information. There are links in the description.